It is March the 6th, 2005. An A310 flying from Varadero in Cuba to Quebec in Canada finds itself rocking back and forth after a thud was heard. The pilot tries to engage the autopilot, but it only makes things worse. Will they make it back? Keep watching to find out. It's the 6th of March, 2005 at Juan Gualberto Gomez Airport in Varadero, Cuba. Air Transat Flight 961 is getting ready for a flight to Quebec in Canada. It is a 4-hour flight. The captain's identity, as far as I know, is unknown, though I do know that he had flown for 9 years with Air Transat and had over 10,000 flight hours under his belt. The first officer's identity is also unknown, though I do know that he had flown with Air Transat for 18 years and had over 11,000 flight hours under his belt. On board the plane is 262 passengers and 9 crew members, totaling 271 people on board. The plane used that day was a 15-year-old Airbus A310-308ET with the tail number Charlie Golfa Papa Alpha Tango. For reference, the oldest Airbus A300 still flying is 39.7 years old, and many planes fly for over 20 years. In short, this plane was well within the limits for age. The plane takes off for its short flight at 2:48 a.m. The plane then climbed to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Flight attendants then starts the in-flight service. At around 3:02 a.m., a loud thud or bang is heard. Whatever it was shakes the plane violently. Then the plane starts to do what is called a Dutch roll. A Dutch roll, in simple words, is when the plane starts to roll from side to side while yawing from side to side at the same time constantly. The captain then takes control from the co-pilot. This is normal in an emergency. The captain then disconnects the autopilot. The pitch of the aircraft is getting difficult to control. The captain then tries to get the workload down by turning on the autopilot. But this just makes the Dutch roll get even worse. The captain then disconnects the autopilot and decides to fly manually. The plane then starts to climb. As the plane reaches 35,900 feet, the pilots then notifies ATC of the issue and ask for clearance to descend. ATC gives the pilots clearance to descend. The pilots try to go through the ECAM system to try to find out what has happened to the A310. The ECAM, or Electronic Centralized Aircraft Monitor, is a little screen in the center of the cockpit where you can see things like engine RPM and many other things. The ECAM, though, does not have any warnings related to the control problems the pilots are facing. There is actually no warnings on the ECAM. The pilots, though, hope that by descending, the problem will go away or at least get a bit better. The pilots think that it may have something to do with the yaw dampers, but when the pilot looks at the switches, both yaw dampers are on and working. And if a yaw damper failure had occurred, a warning would have popped up on the ECAM. The autopilot would also disconnect itself if the yaw dampers failed. But when the plane passed through 28,000 feet, the Dutch roll had stopped. The pilots, though, keep on descending to 10,000 feet so they can try to land at Fort Lauderdale. The captain now gives the co-pilot controls back. The pilot says to the flight attendant that they should get ready for an emergency landing. The pilots then calls up airline dispatch to discuss the situation. It's then decided that the plane would not land at Fort Lauderdale but head back towards Varadero. The plane lands back at Varadero at 3:19 a.m. The plane was then parked at the gate. The crew then decided to do a walk around visual inspection of the aircraft. When the pilots looked at the vertical stabilizer, they could see the horrors that had happened to the aircraft. Because when they looked at the vertical stabilizer, they saw that the rudder was gone and it was nowhere to be found. The rudder had separated mid-flight. Now the investigation started. The investigation was started by the Transport Safety Board of Canada, or the TSB of Canada, but for simplicity in this video, we'll just call them the TSB. The TSB searched the flight control system to try and find a fault that could lead to a rudder separation. But the TSB found that there was nothing wrong with the flight control system. The TSB then decided to see if Air Transat maintenance was up to date. After all, this is Air Transat we're talking about. The airline that put the wrong hydraulic pipes on an A330, which caused it to almost ditch in the Atlantic Ocean. The TSB looked at the maintenance procedures of Air Transat. Though nothing was found to be carried out wrong, the aircraft had been maintained properly. The maintenance records of the plane's previous owner, Emirates, was also checked. Though no serious issues were found there either. Though nothing remarkable was found, something did come out of this. The TSB found that about 8 years earlier, a lightning strike had hit the aircraft rudder. It was repaired and put back into service. Could this have been the cause of the accident? The TSB did not know yet. They then looked at how the rudder was checked. Daily checks of the rudder consist of a visual inspection from the ground. The rudder, though, is 15 meters up in the air. This check, though, can only pick up significant damage. The horizontal stabilizer also blocks a bit of the view of the rudder. Therefore, these checks cannot pick up a lot of things. Though every 2 to 3 weeks a check of the rudder is conducted. This consists of a person looking at the rudder within arm's length of the rudder. That would translate to about half a meter away from the rudder. This inspection, though, can only pick up clearly visible damage. The rudder is not checked from the inside. Though every 5 years a check of the side panels is done. This test, though, is limited to a 40mm wide strip along the edge of the rudder. The inspection, though, cannot pick up anything out of the 40mm strip. The test will only detect large inner skin disbands. An inspection of the Air Transat fleet was then done. Inspection techniques like X-ray was then done. Damage was then found with these tests, which could not be found with a visual inspection. Water and inner skin disband was found inside the rudder with these techniques. Though Air Transat did have these techniques, they were not part of any maintenance done by the airline. The TSB had a theory to what happened on Air Transat Flight 961. The TSB theorized that sometime before the accident, a disband or fracture occurred inside the rudder. The cause of the damage might have been a weak bond at the C-section. Weak bonding was found at the C-section along the interior lower front of the left side panel. It is theorized that the damage then grew without detection. On Air Transat Flight 961, the damage had grown so much that the damage started to become bigger and bigger until the rudder could not stay on. The rudder was then blown off. The rudder separating could have created a large sideways force on the aircraft tail. This sideways force could have made the vertical stabilizer flutter. Around 1 to 2 seconds later, there was a backwards and downwards force, which could be the failure of the upper hinge points as the rudder started to separate. The rudder separation lasted about 7 seconds. After the separation, only 16% of the rudder effectiveness remained. The rudder separated more and more during the flight, and by the end of the flight, the rudder had 0% effectiveness. The TSB recommended a more detailed search program be implemented. This would allow airlines to fix the problems before they would become deadly. The TSB also recommended that Airbus should take a look at how they inspected if the vertical stabilizer and rudder of the A300 and A310 is in okay condition. Charlie Golf Papa Alpha Tango was fixed and returned to service. Charlie Golf Papa Alpha Tango flew for 15 more years with Air Transat before being retired from service on the 27th of March 2020 when Air Transat retired their fleet of A310s. The aircraft went into storage at Mirabel International Airport in Montreal on the 30th of March 2022. Charlie Golf Papa Alpha Tango was later scrapped in October of 2021. Now this incident, to anybody who knows a few accidents and incidents, might look a lot like American Airlines Flight 587. Flight 587 was an A300B4 605R, which on takeoff suffered total vertical stabilizer failure. Though these flights might seem similar, they are not. Air Transat Flight 961 was caused by damage to the rudder, and American Airlines Flight 587 crashed because of pilot error. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Bye.